Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to have a presentation of our victim services here at OneEighty. Today's speaker is going to be Gayle Byrne. She's our coordinated community response specialist here at OneEighty. Take it away, Gayle.
Thanks, Dwight. So my name is Gayle Byrne. I'm the Coordinated Community Response Specialist here at OneEighty. And what that means is that my job responsibilities include working with law enforcement and community social service agencies to work directly with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, human trafficking, stalking, basically any victims of any sort of sexual violence for that part of our agency's services. So we work very closely with the Victim Services Department here in the agency. I work in terms of outreach and education within the community as well to share both information about all of the services here at our agency and to share information within the community to let people know about the services that are available and to share information about domestic violence and sexual assault. We work closely with 3 area colleges as well, and also with the area high schools and middle schools that we service in Wayne and Holmes counties. So today we're going to talk about victim services and all of the services that we offer here at our agency, as well as our hospital advocacy program, and then the survivor Tote project that we are able to offer through the grant that we were able to secure through Serve Ohio. So the objectives that we're looking at today, first, let me start by saying that OneEighty Advocates Sexual Assault Response Team, which is called the SART. The SART is comprised of victim advocates, law enforcement, our sexual assault nurse examiners who conduct forensic examinations with domestic violence and sexual assault survivors that present at the emergency room. Prosecutors, and also our child advocacy center when we're dealing with minors. They're all components of our SART team. Hospital advocates are all trained to work with survivors, and the goal is to maintain their physical, psychological, and emotional safety. So as I was saying, the objectives of today are to identify the specific programs and services that we offer for victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, stalking, human trafficking here at OneEighty. Also to talk about our hospital advocacy program and to talk about what exactly our hospital advocates do, and then to talk about our survivor Tote program. So victim services, what's that all about exactly? So what it really means is that we advocate for survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, stalking, and human trafficking. Our victim services not only includes victim advocates, but also it includes our 24-hour crisis hotline. It includes the crisis shelter, which is emergency housing shelter, and we operate the rape crisis center for both Wayne and Holmes counties, which are the 2 counties that we service. So each of those services falls within the umbrella of victim services. So first I'd like to talk about our shelter. So our domestic violence shelter has been around since 1979, and it has grown so much since then. It originally was incorporated as a volunteer safe house, someone's private home who volunteered their home for battered women and their children, and it grew from there into a permanent shelter that was a 4-bedroom home. And from 1979 to 1999, it grew until finally it became our permanent location where we are now in 1999, and Julia's place was open. So it is now a 44-bed shelter. And it is full much of the time, and we service both counties, Wayne and Holmes County. So we have 2 victim advocates, Kate Abruzzino and Tina Zigafus. So Kate Abruzzino has been with us for 13 years. She's a licensed social worker, and she handles survivors here in Wayne County. And then we have Tina Zigafus, who's been with us for 11 years, and she is our victim advocate in Holmes County. And Holmes County has a very high Amish and Plain community population. And so that is very much her specialty, is that underserved population. And she is very much embedded in that community and lives there as well. So in terms of victim advocacy support services and exactly what victim advocates do, there is a whole host of responsibilities that they complete. The first being safety. So safety planning with survivors is so critically important. There is actually a formalized plan that they work through with survivors. Oftentimes, safety planning with a survivor involves making a plan to be safe and stay in their environment with an abuser. It's not always planning to leave an abusive situation. Victim advocacy is not about encouraging a victim to leave or to stay. It's not about making a decision for a victim. It's about empowering a victim to make their own choices, but to give them lots of information and resources and helping them to be safe in their situation, whatever that might be. So safety planning is very important. Civil standby is arranging to have the police available and on site when a victim is moving their belongings from their domain, if they live with their abuser, or if their abuser is moving their possessions out when the survivor is in the home. And then there's the danger assessment, which is a lethality assessment that we use. It's been around since the mid-'80s. We use that here in Wayne County on site at domestic violence calls with our law enforcement. They're all specially trained in that. And we use that to assess the risk of lethality with an abuser. And then in addition to on-site at domestic violence calls, there is also the opportunity to go through that danger assessment in more detail. If a victim were to call the hotline, the 24-hour crisis hotline, and work through that with our hotline workers as well, or with a victim advocate. The victim advocates also are able to help a survivor secure a civil protection order, and they do an awful lot of that work here in our office. Victim notification, which is the VINE program, it's an Ohio program to notify victims when their abuser is being paroled, let out of an incarceration situation. And then lastly, the Safe at Home program registration, which is also an Ohio program where a survivor can sign up with the Secretary of State's office to have an anonymous address. It allows them to maintain the ability to vote, to receive all of their mail, but their address is actually registered in Columbus, Ohio, as opposed to having a mailing address in their at an address wherever they actually live. So their registered address shows up as coming from Columbus so that their abuser cannot find them. But they have all of the legal rights that any other citizen would have in terms of voting, owning a home, all of those sorts of things. When it comes to support for victims, our victim advocates spend a lot of time with court accompaniment. They, depending on the magistrate or judge, sometimes they're actually allowed into court proceedings, sometimes they're not. But I know that here in Wayne County, our magistrates and judges are excellent in that regard, and most often they are allowed into the proceedings. And just that support, that moral support and comfort is a huge sense of encouragement. And they do a lot of that. Advocacy with other agencies. So what that really means is that sometimes there's a handoff. So that could be a referral to legal counseling with legal aid, for instance. Sometimes it could be a situation where there is a need for mental health counseling with psychiatry, which we don't have a psychiatrist on staff. So we might need to refer to a counseling center with one of our partner agencies here in town. It could be our housing department, or a host of other community agencies that we have partnerships with. We also have an ACT support group, which stands for Action Changes Things, and that is run by our victim advocates. It's actually run out of our shelter, and our shelter residents are encouraged to attend. It happens one night each week. However, all of our clients are also always welcome, and each week there is a different topic. But the victim advocates are the ones that create the topics and run the support group. Then, of course, as mentioned before, the SART team, the sexual assault response team, the hospital advocacy program is part of the SART team, which we'll address here in a moment. And then they also work in terms of support with victim compensation applications, which is one of the legal rights in the state of Ohio for all victims, is to seek compensation, financial compensation, as a victim of crime. In terms of community education, this is part of what I do in the department in conjunction with the victim advocates. Oftentimes we work together with community education. For instance, Kate, one of our victim advocates, and we both sit on the Elder Alliance. So each year we speak at one of the monthly meetings about domestic violence in the elderly community, for instance. That would be one example of community education that we both do. Or, for instance, in the colleges, we might speak at one of the sociology classes about domestic violence in rural populations. And that would be something that we've done jointly together, or the victim advocate has done on her own. This is a list of some of the different topics that they talk about, because this is their area of expertise. In terms of referrals, the most common referrals that the victim advocates tend to make are to community legal aid. They work a lot with community legal aid because the victim advocates are not attorneys. They do a lot with protection orders, but they must be very clear to not fill out protection orders on their own. The victim has to be the one that completes a protection order with the help of a victim advocate. It has to be an attorney that actually files a protection order. So victim advocates often refer to community legal aid, and then many times community legal aid attorneys end up representing victims in ongoing court proceedings. Other service providers, as I mentioned before, and then the two alliances in Ohio that are the primary alliances in support of domestic violence and sexual assault survivors are the Ohio Domestic Violence Network and the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. And we work closely with them, and we refer survivors to them, to their website regularly as well. In terms of outreach, I mentioned underserved populations. Here I have some photos just representing in Wayne and Holmes counties, the two counties we serve. Our underserved populations are represented predominantly by the Amish and Plain community, the Hispanic community, LGBTQIA+. We have 3 universities, 3 colleges, the College of Worcester. We have Ohio State University. They have a branch, the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences, and then a branch of the University of Akron at Wayne College. So college students, rural, our area is rural in general, so rural population in general, and then the others that I mentioned. So that would be what we would consider underserved populations. The Child Advocacy Center, when dealing with minor population, and then the community at large. So we work with church groups, the Rotary, Kiwanis, those sorts of groups as well. So speaking of our hospital advocacy program, so what's that all about? So what that is, it is a group of volunteers. So we have volunteers everywhere from college students that are interested in going into social work or are just very civically minded, to older men and women. It's from every walk of life, that are working full-time to stay at home, moms and dads. It's really a variety that runs the gamut. And our volunteers go through a rigorous training program. We have 3 different tiers of training. So with our tier 1 and 2 volunteers, they go through 20 hours of training. And with our hospital advocacy program, it's a 40-hour training program because there's so much more involved, and there's so much in terms of patient confidentiality and the complexities around what we work with domestic violence and sexual assault, human trafficking. There's just a lot to learn. So it's a 40-hour training program. And then in terms of working with the hospitals, we have staff backup as well in case there would ever be a scenario that there would not be a specially trained volunteer available. We do have staff in our department in community relations and prevention that would be on call. So what that means when I say on call, we're talking about a domestic violence or sexual assault victim that would present at one of 2 emergency rooms in our service area for a forensic examination as a result of being sexually assaulted. So we have complete calendar call coverage with our advocacy program. And really the overarching goal of this program is to provide a calming presence for a survivor and oftentimes a co-survivor. So sometimes a survivor presents into the emergency room alone. Sometimes they are taken to the hospital by the police. Sometimes they're taken by a family member or a friend or a roommate or a neighbor. It really varies. Sometimes there are multiple people that are with them. Sometimes supporting the co-survivor is as big a job as supporting the survivor. Sometimes the co-survivor stays in the room. Sometimes they leave. It's just really a dynamic process, but creating a sense of calm and letting the survivor take the lead about what they want is just really important. Another responsibility of the hospital advocate is to assist the sexual assault nurse examiner in the process, not actually conducting the exam, but by law, the chain of custody cannot be broken. So once the examination has started, the nurse examiner cannot leave the room for any reason. So if that nurse would need to ask someone a question outside of the room or retrieve something that wasn't in the room, they can't leave. So it's an excellent opportunity for that hospital advocate to be of service, to go get someone, go get something to help out the nurse examiner to be more effective and efficient in their job. Also, at a certain point in the examination process, the survivor is able to eat or drink. There's a point where they cannot because of taking swabs, mouth swabs, or DNA evidence. However, at some point they are able to. So being able to go get food and drink or clothing, because if possible, retrieving the clothing that they arrive in is an important piece of evidence. So one of the things that we provide at the hospitals, we have tubs of clothing in various sizes for survivors that they can then take home, that they can wear and take home with them. So providing that is another responsibility for the advocate. Helping to arrange transportation and shelter. Sometimes victims come right from the scene of their assault. Sometimes they come a day or two later. They have 96 hours. It is still, in terms of forensic examination, 96 hours is the time frame that a forensic exam is able to be performed. So it could be a couple of days, or it could be right away. Sometimes they have nowhere to go. Sometimes they're going to go stay with a parent or a friend. So, you know, it just depends on their situation. Sometimes they're looking for emergency shelter. So part of being a hospital advocate could be calling around to whether it's our shelter or a neighboring shelter if our shelter is full, trying to find a safe place for them to go, trying to find transportation for them to get there, those sorts of things. Also, there is a resource packet that is provided to every survivor, and explaining every item in that packet so that they understand what is there. Not pouring over each item, but just very quickly explaining high level what's in it, so that if they have any immediate questions, they can be addressed. That's really important. And then while the nurse, OneEighty has an interview document that is then turned in to the victim advocate, who, with the permission of the survivor, the victim advocate follows up within 24 to 48 hours by telephone to reach out and see if they would like to make an appointment, to talk for further support, to look at whatever they need, whether it is legal assistance, protection orders, safety planning, anything at all. So while the nurse is conducting the verbal interview, the hospital advocate simultaneously fills in as much information on the OneEighty patient interview as possible, so that there isn't a need to ask additional questions, creating any additional trauma for the victim. There may be one or two other questions, but the nurse's interview is very, very in-depth. So typically there really isn't any need for additional questioning. So that's one of the responsibilities, is just to utilize that opportunity to fill in that information. And then, because of the pandemic, early on in the COVID-19 pandemic, our agency was able to take the opportunity to launch telehealth, which was a virtual counseling opportunity. And just recently, we were able to secure grant funding with tablets that we will be launching soon, to be able to offer support for victims with the hospital advocacy program, so that if there is a situation because of the pandemic where hospital advocates are not able to get into the hospital because of a lockdown, that hospital advocates will still be able to connect with a victim in the emergency room via a tablet. So that will be launching sometime soon. I don't have an exact date, but we have those tablets and are at the point of working with our IT department. So that is a really nice new additional benefit to be able to offer to survivors as well. So for the Survivor Tote project, where this came from is always in an effort to increase and better the quality of our services. The idea behind this project is to bring an additional measure of comfort to an already really emotional and stressful situation, which is what the hospital advocates are doing anyway, simply by their presence. Oftentimes, a hospital advocate will take their own bag with snacks and drinks and tissue and fidget toys and things like that they bring from home to be comforting. Sometimes they might bring a blanket or a toy or, whatever they can. So the idea behind this is to take that a step further and provide something that we can do consistently for every single victim, So it's providing helpful resources, self-care activities, and to be able to do this at that moment in the emergency room during that forensic exam, which is so incredibly fraught and traumatic, but then also to have a takeaway that will be helpful in the future for moments of distress as well. So I'd just like to take a few moments and go over the different items that will be going into this project. So it starts with a small drawstring satchel. So it looks like a small backpack. So it can be utilized for this project, but then also reused again and again and again as a small purse or backpack. And then a beautiful, not handmade, but looks like a quality card with a handwritten note of support. So each hospital advocate will write out a handwritten note of support in advance. So they're already done and ready to go before they ever even show up to the call. So they'll be in the bags. And then soft tissue, because as we know, whenever you go somewhere clinical, the tissue is always hard and nasty. So nice, soft, comforting tissue and hand lotion. So both of these ideas of the hand lotion and tissue are just that regardless of the time of year, regardless of the situation, these are both just items that make you feel comfortable and cared for. Fuzzy socks. Fuzzy socks are important because emergency rooms are always so very cold, and they do have to, the patients, survivors do have to strip down to nothing but that hospital, the thin hospital, I don't even know what it's called, exam little nighty thing. But the forensic examiner will allow them to put fuzzy socks on and then just take them off for that portion when they do the head to toe examination and put them back on. So it's something that they can wear during the examination, and then obviously also after the fact moving forward. And I've never met a person yet that didn't love fuzzy socks. So it's just a sweet thing to be able to provide. A fidget toy is something that would be really beneficial in that moment, because they tend to be very nervous and fidgety, don't know where to look, don't know what to do with their hands, and are often fidgeting with a blanket or their gown, or their hair, or just it's something to do with their hands. So in that moment, with nervous energy, it's a calming, something to do that's calming. Next is an adult coloring book and pencils. This we have found over and over, and particularly at our shelter, it is one of our residents' favorite things. They love to color. It is therapeutic. It's very much a self-care activity because it's mindless and it's peaceful, it's calming, it's mindless, it's just easy therapy. So it is not meant for in that moment. I can't imagine that someone would be on an exam table coloring in a book, but it's meant to be something to take away and in a moment of stress to be able to utilize to reduce tension and to focus on self-care. And that's how it would be presented by the hospital advocate to the survivor. And then much the same way, a journal. And the journal can be used for a lot of different things. It could be used to focus on gratitude, moments of gratitude to focus on what's good. It could be used to pour out feelings about what happened. It could be anything. Everyone's going to have a different, each survivor is going to have a different sense of how they want to handle and move forward in their journey. But journaling is a really wonderful, beautiful, therapeutic way of trying to move forward. It could also be used to keep track of resources and to make lists of plans. Any of those things would be good options. And then lastly is the resource packet that I mentioned, and I'll go on with that in a moment. So in terms of the resource packet, this is a list, and I'll just briefly touch. All of these items are included in the resource packet. So it starts with a personal letter from the OneEighty victim advocates that introduces themselves, sort of what they do, what they can offer, a little bit about the services OneEighty as an agency provides, the services that the victim advocates provide. It mentions that the victim advocates, their services are free, which is really important because we wouldn't expect that the general public would know that that was true. So that could make a difference whether someone would choose to use their services or not. Knowing that this is all free of charge is an important piece of information, and it gives their phone numbers. Then our OneEighty services brochure that goes in brief, goes through all of the different services that we offer here at the agency. Next is a combination document. One side of it is the domestic violence power and control wheel. The other side is a combination of the equality wheel, which is the juxtaposition. So the one side is all about an abusive relationship. The equality wheel is what a healthy relationship looks like. And then also the cycle of violence that shows how cyclical an abusive relationship is. So for victims of domestic violence in particular, oftentimes they don't recognize themselves as victims. So sometimes seeing these documents is the very first time they're able to have an aha moment and truly recognize, because it's in black and white, they can see actual examples of ways in which they are repeatedly being abused, whether it's emotional or physical or mental or through isolation or intimidation. So it's important to have this as a resource. The VINE services, that is the alert about an abuser being set free from incarceration. The Safe at Home is the anonymous address that I mentioned. The Ohio Crime Victims' Rights booklet is a large booklet with lots and lots of information about their rights, including the victims' compensation that I mentioned. Victim Assistance Program, that is through the prosecutor's office. They also have victim advocates there that offer assistance to victims and help walk them through the court proceeding process. and then the 180 Family Violence Safety Resource, and that offers safety planning information, a list of common, the most important items if someone is leaving their situation, documents, the kind of documents they need to take with them. Also gives websites and national resources, Ohio resources, things like that. And then this is simply a combination photograph of all of the different items that, and these are the actual items that are in the Survivor Tote project. In the bottom right corner, that is the cover of the journal. And then the totes themselves, it's a variety pack of different bright colors. And then in the bottom left corner, those are the adult coloring books. So again, it's a variety. So everything is a variety. So lots of lovely floral lotions, 6 colors of fuzzy socks, 12 colors of tote bags, I think 24 different fidget toys. So this is a visual representation of what we are sharing. I think everything is here except for the Kleenex, because we all know what Kleenex is, right? So we thank you so much for your time and attention, and particularly for Serve Ohio for allowing us this opportunity to complement our hospital advocacy program. We're already so proud of it, but to be able to make it even better for our survivors here in Wayne and Holmes counties. So thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thanks, Gayle. Great presentation. And got a couple of little housekeeping notes here. If there's any questions on anything that pops up, you can give a call here to the office if you have any further details. It's at 330-264-8498. You can also call that number if you're wanting to interested to be a volunteer, maybe a volunteer hospital advocate, or maybe a volunteer of another department. Just give that a call and they will switch you to my extension, which is 3312. We can talk about what opportunities there are for you there. And I guess we'll be remiss if we don't put the 24-hour hotline number out there in case there's somebody out there who needs it. It's 1-800-686-1122. All right. Well, thank you for all of you for your attention this day, and thank you again for Serve Ohio for allowing us to promote volunteerism and promote this Survivor Tote project. Any last words, Gayle?
That's it. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody.